product really has to stand on its own two legs, and what you should be figuring out initially is your concept, product market fit. People love soda. The issue is it's not good for them. So if you look at that, if you can keep everything else the same and solve for the problem, you're essentially giving them the perfect product.
He's the co-founder of OLIPOP, the $1.85 billion soda brand that's disrupting the beverage aisle with a gut-healthy twist on your favorite nostalgic drinks. From startup to soda sensation, OLIPOP has become one of the fastest-growing wellness brands in the United States. Please welcome David Lester.
Your product needs to be visible on shelf, but there should be natural turn and demand for your product. Consumers should be finding a use for it, they're filling a need state, and then them coming back to repeat purchase. It's much better to be in 24 stores selling amazingly than 100 stores doing the same volume not selling that well. If you're putting out something that is average or that you don't think is exceptional, don't bother, because it's just gonna get ignored anyway. Use the time, the energy, and the resource to invest in something truly exceptional that actually has a chance of getting noticed.
Hear the stories, learn the proven methods, and accelerate your growth and future through entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Foundr Podcast with Nathan Chan.
So the first question that I ask everyone that comes on is, how did you get your job, aka how did you find yourself doing the work you're doing today?
Well, I started my career in the corporate realm. So I came straight out of college and went to work for Diageo, which is a spirits company that owns Johnny Walker and Guinness and Smirnoff and those sorts of brands. So I did that for about a decade. I started in London, then went to Sydney for about 4 years, and then Brazil for 2 years. And after 10 years, my learning curve had kind of tapped out, and I really wanted to go and do something by myself. And it was at that point I was moving back to the States. My wife and I decided to move to San Francisco. I told my boss I was leaving, and she said, if your mind's made up, you might want to speak to this guy. He's looking for a business partner. That turned out to be Ben, who I work with now. And that's really how we met 10 years ago and started out on the journey together. So very kind of naive route in, but with some twists and turns, worked out in the end.
Yeah, that's crazy. So OLIPOP's your first business?
It's actually our second, yeah. So we had a prior venture called Obie. It was in a very similar space. And yeah, very much a version 1.0. I think, we did that together for about 3 years or so. And then we had 2 years in between Obie and OLIPOP, kind of reformulating. But yeah, Obie was a classic first venture, lots of learning, made a ton of mistakes, and had to do a lot of self-reflection on the back of it as well. So, we really look at OLIPOP as kind of a 10-year-old business, even though we're technically only in our fifth year in the market.
So tell me about Obie. I'd love to hear the backstory. You said there was a lot of self-reflection. So tell me, can we delve a bit deeper? What happened? So how'd you start that business? Did you raise any money? Talk us through.
Yeah, so I remember, when I first met Ben, my co-founder, we met at a coffee shop in Palo Alto. He had a bag of sodas that he had, hand decanted into glass bottles and capped himself. And I tasted them, and they tasted amazing. And which was kind of interesting because they were so low in sugar. And he just spoke to me for a couple of hours about the gut microbiome and probiotics. And I really knew nothing about this area before meeting Ben. I struggled to read a nutritional label, but Ben's background is he grew up eating a standard American diet. He was overweight. And in his teenage years, he made a decision to change his diet. And he lost weight, but he also, his mental clarity improved. And he became really interested in the gut-brain connection, so much so that he dropped out of college to teach himself microbiology. And he'd been on a kind of 5-year journey or so, getting to this point of, having a formulation for Obie and needed a business partner to help launch it. And so, I got back from this meeting with Ben. My wife was at home, and I think I actually had an offer at the time from a consulting firm in San Francisco. It paid pretty well. It was downtown. My wife was excited that we'd both be earning for the first time and we could meet for lunch. And I got back from this meeting and she looked at me and she said, "Oh no, you're going to do this thing with this guy, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, look, I think this is really interesting." So, yeah, we had no, I just moved to the States. I didn't know anything about the retailers here and the environment. I knew a bit about concept development and new product launches through my work for Diageo. But I didn't know anything about capital raising, neither did Ben. And so we really had to learn all of that. And we made a lot of mistakes in how we structured things and also had to go through a lot of personal growth as well. I think, being an entrepreneur, you require discipline in your decision making. It's hard to have that first time around. There's just a lot to learn as well. You're stringing from a fire hose, and I really just couldn't learn it quick enough. And so, I find that once you've in startup, I think your mistakes as well as, or your decisions more accurately, compound. So you make good decisions and those compound into great outcomes. And, you make a few wrong turns and those compound over time as well, to the point where you can find yourself totally boxed in. And that's really where we found ourselves. And, we got a modest exit and left Obie and then kind of rethought through the concept and also thought better ways that we could launch a new product as well in a similar space.
So before we dive into Obie, I'd love to dive a bit deeper. You said you made a lot of mistakes. What were some of those mistakes?
Some of the partners that we brought in, I think you can undervalue what you've got. I think we had a great product and a great idea, and there's lots of people around you saying, "Hey, you can't do this without us. This is really difficult. You need my expertise." And it's kind of true. Well, it's true that it's difficult, and it's true that, you're going to struggle to do it by yourself. But equally, my experience is that anybody who's telling you that they have the fix for that is probably, inaccurate in their assessment. And, we just, we relied too much on others, and there was stuff that we just had to learn ourselves. So, I went into the second venture with ironically, a lot more humility and a lot more self-confidence. I think those things are linked, to be honest. And believing in what we had built together and what we, the concept that we had and what we were capable of doing. And so when we came to tough decisions or turns in the road, I think often, startup really, the thing that's most important is what you say no to rather than what you say yes. There can be a lot of decisions that can intuitively seem like the right thing to do, but, on reflection are actually going to lead you down a bad path. And it's those ones that are the hardest to say no to. Know those moments when you don't do the obvious thing or the thing that everybody's telling you to do, and you take the contrarian position. So we did less of that first time around, and we picked the right moments, I think, second time around to do that.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, I think in terms of our expansion, we launched in conventional retail first time around, and we had an opportunity to go with a major retailer, and it seemed like a great thing to do because we needed distribution at the time. So but actually we were a lot more disciplined second time around about the phasing of how we rolled out. So we decided, look, we're going to launch on the West Coast first. It's going to be in the natural channel to begin with. If we can't prove that this thing works there, then it makes no sense to go to conventional, because that's a harder class of trade to make your product work in. And so we really should have said no to that distribution and worked harder to find a natural retailer to partner with as an entry point into the category. And but instead we were just kind of grasping at whatever we could get our hands on at that point. And it's difficult. It's difficult to believe that you can find the right path. You lack the self-confidence. You take the thing that comes to you first, even if it's suboptimal. And if you don't have the battle wounds, I think sometimes it's difficult to say no as well, because think, well, everybody's saying this is a great retailer and we probably should do it. And, you know, second time around, we learned to say no and have, you know, confidence in the conviction of our gut instinct. And I think our gut instinct also got honed over time because we'd, you know, seen the outcome of some of those decisions as well.
So how did you end up selling Obie? What happened?
It was a, you know, a modest exit in the end. And there was an incubation partner that we were working with that took over the brand, and we parted ways on that, and, you know, decided that we wanted to start over and really own the thing ourselves. And, you know, we felt like there was better ways to do this as well. You know, differences from Obie to OLIPOP were, you know, with OLIPOP, we launched in a can rather than a bottle because, you know, we felt it was a more cost-effective format. It was more convenient, could scale better. We actually went into prebiotics instead of probiotics, which was the focus of our first venture, which was interesting at the time because nobody had really heard of prebiotics, but we were speaking to the leading nutritionists, microbiologists in the space, and what they were telling us is that, you know, where the science was going is that you should really focus on the bacteria already in your gut and feeding them rather than putting foreign bacteria into your system. And that's really the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic. Prebiotics are food for the good bacteria already in your gut, and probiotics are additional good bacteria. So, you know, we launched with that concept because we saw that's where the science was going, and we wanted to create a product that really helped people, and we thought that was the best way to do it. But investors really rejected that thesis because it wasn't trending in the market at the time. And, you know, there was only 2 or 3 investors that were really willing to back us at that point.
Hey Foundr fam, I want to take a quick break from the conversation to talk to you about something super exciting. We're officially partnered with OMNISEND, the email marketing and SMS platform built specifically for e-commerce founders. We've been recommending OMNISEND to Foundr students for a while now because it just works. Whether you're launching your first store or you're scaling to 7 figures, it really helps you automate your marketing and get real results. Did you know on average, OMNISEND customers make $68 for every $1 they spend, which is an insanely good return on investment. And because you're part of the Foundr community, you get 50% off your first 3 months with the code FOUNDR50. Just head to omnisend.com/founder without the E to get started. All right, now let's jump back into the show.
Interesting. So you end up selling Obie. You mentioned a couple of times modest exit, and then you took a couple years off and you spent time in reflection. So when did you start OLIPOP, and when did you and Ben decide, oh, yep, we're going to go again? Did you bring some of the old team together, get the gang together? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing for me after Obie was rest, to be honest. I was exhausted, as I think a lot of first-time founders or entrepreneurs in general are. The things that have helped me be less exhausted and I said the second time around, I've really enjoyed the experience. The first time I really did not. It was awful, to be honest. It was very tiring, super stressful. I realized that there's things I can't control. So that's a major thing, kind of giving up control. You know, understanding that you can work through most things with a growth mindset. So yeah, the first was rest, just kind of recuperating from that stressful experience. The second was reflection. You know, I'd come straight out of a corporate career, and there's elements of that corporate training that were very helpful, but a lot of it was not. I mean, the startup world is very, very different. There's a range of paths open to you that is not the case in a corporate environment. You know, I was working for a company that operates in 180 markets around the world. Huge organization, biggest spirits company globally. down to starting something myself. And, you know, I learned a lot from Ben. He had never worked for a large company before and is very entrepreneurial. And I think in some ways there was aspects of what I brought to the table that he learned as well. And we talked about it together. We didn't work very well together on Obie, and we had to work that through and chat about it. So that was an element of, you know, introspection for us and some humility there as well. I think my ego really got hammered into shape. You know, I went in my early 30s, extremely self-confident into the startup space. I thought I knew a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of stuff that I didn't realize that I didn't know. And Obie really taught me those lessons. So I came with a lot more humility second time around, which helps with your growth mindset as well. And then, you know, we also looked at the concept, and Ben went to Japan for a bit and continued studying the gut microbiome. And, you know, this is where we landed on the formula. Yeah, Ben worked on that, and I worked on the positioning and packaging. And it was a relatively long process, a couple of years. We really wanted to get it right. And we said, look, if we're going to do this again, it has to be better than the first time. And we definitely must do this better. And so we didn't go to market until we were confident that was the case.
So tell me about those iterations with OLIPOP. Like, how long did it take to get the formula right? Talk us through that.
Yeah, that was really Ben's area. And, you know, Ben reads very widely. You know, he reads academic papers, he reads Eastern and Western, you know, nutritional science and medicine. So, you know, what we eventually landed on, and then, you know, you have to look at sourcing of those ingredients and stuff too. So the final formulation has 8 different plant-based ingredients in that support digestive health. We ultimately ended up doing research with Baylor and Purdue medical colleges last year to look at the efficacy of those ingredients. And, you know, it's academic standard research. It's, you know, you can't pay these people to invent the results. And the response that came back was fantastic, showing that OLIPOP is increasing the diversity of the bacteria in the gut, increasing the production of bifidobacterium, which is the main human probiotic present in breast milk, and also increasing the production of short-chain fatty acids. So that was really Ben's area. He spent a lot of time on that. And I spent a lot of time on the concept. And, you know, we spent all of our money on a design agency and working through a packaging design that took us about a year to develop. And then I ran, I think, about 10 research groups for myself across Northern and Southern California, just reaching out to friends and saying, hey, can you get a group of 5 to 10 people together? We'll buy you dinner at your house if we can come and ask you some questions. And we tested everything from the name to the packaging to the liquid. And we saw that the packaging concept we developed really did not work. But it told us what we needed to do, which was really get back to what the soda category is all about. And that's fun, refreshment, color, which indicates, you know, flavor and vibrancy. And so we redesigned 2-3 months before launch, after we'd raised our seed round. So we were working on things right up to the wire for launch.
Yeah, wow. So had you placed an order, and what is an MOQ when it comes to kind of beverages? Like, how does that all work? And yeah, talk to us about that, man, because it sounds like it'd be cost intensive.
It's not like tech. Yeah, manufacturing it's slow, it's expensive. Yeah, it's why we had to raise the initial seed round even to get started, because you have to buy your materials and line time and packaging. So we'd certainly we'd been approved our cans. I'm not sure we printed them at that stage. But the proofing process is quite a long one for cans. You know, where you have to go and look at, you know, sign off on how the printed can is coming out. So by the time we changed packaging, we didn't have time to do that process again. So we had to kind of plastic shrink wrap our cans for launch. which is quite expensive. So yeah, you're talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars at times just get started in the food and beverage industry. Depending on, beverage is very difficult to produce at small scale. Sometimes if you're in food and you're making a bar or something like that, you can, start off making it yourself in your kitchen or whatever and ship them out. But beverage is very difficult. You need to rent line time at a manufacturer, and that's expensive.
So it took you about a year to work on the concept all the way to launch. You did, sounds like, pretty extensive testing, not only on just the actual product itself, but the packaging and branding and marketing and the appeal. What was like, how many, like, how you went to a outside manufacturer, right, to produce the product? What was the minimum order quantity for someone just thinking of starting a beverage company? Like, kind of what, like, is it 10,000 drinks? Is it 20? Is it 100,000? How does it work?
Yeah, what you'll find is there's different scale of co-manufacturer, and the manufacturing partners available to you at small scale are very limited, and they tend to not be as technically skilled because the big guys don't want to produce more volumes. It doesn't make any sense for them. And what's difficult in the food and beverage industry is that 9 times out of 10 a company will do a first run and then never return. So these co-manufacturers are not very interested in your first run. Sometimes they're not paying much attention to the quality. They almost don't expect you to come back, because it's often the case. So, if you find the right partner, you can produce a relatively low minimum order quantity. I mean, you'd still be in the thousands of cases. But, you could produce, say, 5,000 cases maybe, which is relatively low order in our space. But, it's challenging to work at that scale. Beverage is not designed to be produced at such small scale. You look at the most effective manufacturers, Coke, Pepsi, they're churning out literally hundreds of cans or bottles a minute on their lines. That's when they're operating most efficiently. So that'll also impact things like your cost of goods. So, you'll struggle to make money until you're over at least 30 million in revenue, I would say, because it's just very difficult to produce, cost effectively at that scale.
Yeah. So talk to me about launch. You said with Obie, you guys launched into retail. From the research that I've done, you guys are now in like 7,000 different grocers now, but did you launch into retail this time round, or you did direct to consumer? Talk us through that.
Yeah, we're now in over 20,000 doors nationally. We're national in Target and Walmart and Whole Foods and Kroger. We started in 24 stores, independent stores in Northern California. And, there's one piece of advice I would have is that scale is definitely your friend when you're starting out a business, because the thing that's really going to eat cash is scale. And it's also very difficult to pivot when you're at scale as well. So if you're in a sophisticated retailer or a large scale retailer, Walmart, for example, there is no wiggle room around, missing an order or not delivering something the way they want it delivered. Independent retailers will give you a lot more wiggle room. You could be out of stock for a week and then go back in stock. You can have a lot more control over that distribution base. And as I say, you're just eating through less cash because you're at lower volume. As soon as you start, once you're in 20,000 doors, we need much bigger manufacturing team. We need bigger sales team. We need, our cost of inventory is huge now to keep pace with that. So we started in 24 stores, that expanded to Erewhon in LA, and then to Whole Foods, and then to other retailers on the West Coast. And then from there, we started to go national, but we only went to the next stage once we were confident that it was working at the level we were at. And And by working, I mean, you're seeing good rate of sales. So often I hear entrepreneurs saying, well, our rate of sales is bad, but it's because we couldn't get in and sample in those stores or whatever else it may be. Your product needs to be visible on shelf, but if that's the case, then there should be natural turn and demand for your product. Consumers should be finding it, finding a use for it, they're filling a need state, and then them coming back to repeat purchase. And that was what was happening with OLIPOP. So without us really sampling the product, which we couldn't because we launched through COVID, we're getting very high or healthy rate of sale initially. And we saw that in the independent trade. Then we saw it in Whole Foods. And then we tested conventional and we saw it there. And we started to expand into other regions and we saw it there as well. And so we just kept on going as we've seen, as we developed confidence that, it's working at each level. Because if you end up in a position where you have multiple regions or retailers that aren't working, that's when you end up hitting the panic button as an entrepreneur, because those stores will delist you and you might not get back in, or investors will look at your performance and say, this is a brand that does not have legs to it. And so you'll struggle to get investment as well. It's always a through line that people project off. So it's much better to be in 24 stores selling amazingly than 100 stores doing the same volume, not selling that well, because people will just project that through line as you scale and say, well, what's the potential of this brand? And it doesn't look as good at that point.
So can you tell us about your philosophy around break one rule and break it hard?
Yeah. So I did a lot of innovation in my time at Diageo, which meant launching new products. And so that was bringing some new to world products. It was line extending of established brands like Smirnoff and Johnny Walker. And I launched tens of different products, and we went through a gated process at Diageo, which involved you taking the product at each stage to the executive team, and they would interrogate it, and your launch strategy and P&L. And that was extremely useful, as you can imagine, because you've got experienced executives who are pulling apart your business plan. And I would say of the stuff that I launched, 90% of it did not work either. So, I got the opportunity to see how things were not working, things that you were really excited about and thought would work. And you're like, oh, I see why that didn't work out. And there's only so many different ways that a consumer goods product can go wrong. So if you've seen 10, 20, 30 examples, you start to see patterns in what's going wrong and which things are likely to work and which things aren't. One of the big ones, and this came from Sil Seller, who was the global innovation director at the time, she really encouraged this idea of break one rule really hard and keep everything else the same. Consumers, where you've got heavy disruption, consumers really struggle to, it could get overwhelming. So they don't know where to place you. They don't know what your product is or what it does. There's odd examples. I mean, maybe you take like the iPhone or something might fall into this category where you deliver, real disruptive innovation, but in the majority of cases, it's quite incremental. You're improving one thing, and then keeping everything else consistent so the consumer can understand and interpret the benefit of your product. So if you take OLIPOP, for example, and really what's important is to look at the consumer dissatisfaction that you're solving for, the consumer need. Consumers really don't have a problem with soda. In fact, people love soda. Root beer tastes amazing. Coke tastes amazing. The branding is really cool. People love those brands. They have nostalgic memories. What is their issue? Their issue is it's not good for them. And they keep getting told this in the media. They keep getting warnings about sugar. So if you look at that, if you can keep everything else the same and solve for the problem, then, you're essentially giving them the perfect product. And so for us, we didn't want to take away from the fun or refreshment of soda, the nostalgia, the memories that people have around it. That's why people struggle to make the change from soda to a kale juice or a water. If you present that to somebody and say, hey, look, here's the nutritional profile of a kale juice and of a can of Coke, and you can see clearly which one's better for you. You choose, but you're an idiot if you pick the Coke. The majority of people are still going to pick Coke because it tastes amazing. It's cheap. It's in their repertoire already. All of these reasons that we know that behavior change is difficult. So, the less you're requiring behavior change from people, the easier it is to get them to switch. And so for us, we said, look, you love soda, we love soda too. We just made it better for you by changing the ingredients. And we don't hit people over the head with that. We don't lecture them about prebiotics and gut health. We say, look, here's enough information that this is credible for you. If you want more, you can get it. It's on our website and you can dig deeper. And if you simply just want to enjoy a soda and not have to worry about the long-term impact on your body, then that's totally fine as well. And, there's a number of examples that we looked at the time. Say Beyond Meat, Seedlip in non-alc spirits. I think Halo Top is a very good example in ice cream as well. Yeah, if you look at Halo Top, they weren't the first low-calorie ice cream, but I think they were the first to understand that ice cream is about indulgence. And so if you don't do indulgence, then it doesn't matter if you got 3 calories or 3,000 calories, nobody is going to drink that product. Nobody's going to eat that product. So, that's where they tell you to eat to the bottom of the tub. It's indulgent. The packaging is gold. The flavors sound delicious. Ultimately it's lower calorie, but they deliver very heavily on indulgence. In fact, at times they outperform the category leader on indulgence. Like Ben & Jerry's is not telling you to eat to the bottom of the tub. And for us, it's really important to understand the nature of the category that we're in. It's soda, it's refreshment, it's fun, it's nostalgia. And, that's our primary goal, is to deliver on that. And then the rule that we broke really hard was ingredients. And we said, hey, we haven't just reduced the sugar a little bit. We cut the sugar by, from 40 grams down to 2. And then we've added in what essentially is kind of like a high-end supplement into this drink that has university standard research behind it showing how this improves your gut health. And that's a massive departure from the ingredients you would find in traditional soda. But ultimately, when you look at the product to consume it doesn't look that different. It's quite familiar to them. And that's reassuring for people. They don't want these things to be complicated.
Hey guys, I really hope you're feeling inspired from today's interview. Now, the truth is, all successful e-commerce founders started from zero, with a spark of an idea and a whole lot of determination. But let's be real, building or growing an e-commerce business is no walk in the park. And that's where Foundr Plus comes in, which I'm really excited to share with you. It's a culmination of a decade worth of work at Foundr. So if you're feeling stuck in your e-commerce business, you're lacking confidence to move forward, or you're worried about making costly mistakes or not knowing how to grow your business, Foundr Plus is here to support you on your journey. You get access to a customized learning pathway with proven frameworks from successful e-commerce founders for fast results, incredible programs, a supportive community, weekly live mentorship, exclusive savings on startup tools, and 24/7 real human support. Try Foundr Plus today for just $1 for 7 days so you can accelerate your business goals. Visit foundr.com/start $trial or click the link in the description to claim your trial. All right, now let's jump back in the show.
Yeah, what you just shared is just basically like a masterclass in differentiation and product iteration. So yeah, I think that's really clever. I love that concept around how you've looked at product development and you've just gone hard on breaking one rule. So I have to ask, when it comes to, I guess, ambassadors for the brand, you guys have done incredibly well. You've got people like Camila Cabello, Gwyneth Paltrow, the list of other celebrities goes on. How did you do that? And when did you start doing that? And then talk us through, you got any cool stories there?
Yeah, I mean, I think given you have a lot of founders listening to the podcast as well, I'd say celebrity is very overvalued in terms of what it can do for your brand. I'd say everything is overvalued. Ultimately, whether your brand is, and this should be reassuring, whether your brand and company is successful or not, really comes down to you and your immediate team. It's not going to be the consultants you have working for you, or, and so I'd say that straight out the gate. All of these things can help for sure, but I wouldn't say they're defining. So never be afraid to walk away from anything that feels uncomfortable to you. Never let anybody oversell what they're going to deliver versus what you're going to do with the brand. But that being said, there's a saying from John Hegarty from BBH that always stuck with me, which is, do interesting things and interesting things will happen to you. I think that's we found that for sure. We started off with a very interesting product. I mean, it's fantastic what Ben developed. It's a very unique thing. We saw value in that. We held the value in that, and saw the value in ourselves as we went to market, with humility. And other people were attracted to what we were doing because it was interesting, so everything from the Minions partnership that we did came at us organically. We had people reaching out a lot. I mean, when Universal reached out to us, the Minions, we said to them, look, this would be great, but you realize we're a small company. Like, we're not Coke. And, they said, look, we understand. We just think it's really cool what you guys are doing, and we would love to partner with your brand. And all the celebrities that have come in have an authentic connection with the brand. So Camila Cabello, we got put in touch with her because she was drinking the product herself. I think she was pictured drinking it at Erewhon, and, we got put in touch and we spoke about it. And she spoke really passionately about, her upbringing in a Hispanic community and the impact that she'd seen of soda on that community, and how committed she was to doing something about that, and was really interested to partner with us. So, it was very organic and authentic. And so, getting money from celebrities is great. I mean, getting money from anywhere is great, to be honest. But what is really interesting and difficult is finding that sort of authentic link up. And I think when you do, that's when it gets, that's when it starts to have impact. Otherwise, if a celebrity's just endorsing it because they've been paid to do so, I think consumers see that now, and it doesn't really resonate too much. So, we've actually just shot and produced an ad with Camila, and we're about to launch that in May, and we're super excited for it. And I think it really resonates with her and resonates with us because we've thought that through together, and where the overlap is for her brand and what she's trying to do, and what we're trying to do as well.
Yeah, I think when it comes to working with thought leaders at any capacity, it can be, if you align them with your brand, it can be a really strong way to build trust. Even from a consumer's mind, from association, even if it is paid or not. It's interesting to hear that you don't believe that it's as strong as it used to be as a trust builder.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's always exciting when a celebrity gets involved. When somebody important or famous, shows interest in what you're doing, it can be extremely validating, because I've sat there in a room in my bedroom working on something, and all of a sudden, when Paltrow and Camila Cabello were interested in it. And, I think having humility also keeps that in perspective as well, that, your ego doesn't run away with you. Really, I could count on one hand, I think, the times that celebrities have really materially impacted the trajectory of a brand's growth. And it's a difficult thing to pull off. Majority of instances, the celebrity partnership really doesn't do too much at all. So one of the areas that we found, we started on Instagram when we launched. That was about 5 years ago, and Instagram was huge for us. And we just built a community of people that, really loved the product and just organically shared around it. And now TikTok is massive for us. And, we have a platform that allows our consumers to get paid for sharing about the brand organically. And, we partner, again, with people pretty authentically around what we're doing. And I think it's an easy brand in that space, because people genuinely are constantly telling me, this product really solves a problem for me, and so they can talk about it. I think beverage as a category is an interesting one. It's quite sticky, and soda is so emotionally resonant for people that, there's a lot of cultural references to talk about with it, which as a marketer makes it a really, really interesting category to be in. It gets harder dependent on the category that you're in and the brand. If we're in a more commoditized space, that gets trickier. But, Coca, Pepsi is some of the most iconic brands in consumer goods. Soda is one of the most highly engaged categories. So we really aim to leverage that, to our advantage.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So, really enjoying this conversation, David, but we have to work towards wrapping up. I've got a couple more questions. The first one is, we've asked someone from our community, and they submitted a ton of questions, and we boiled it down to one. And this is from Lauren. She asked, what was your marketing plan at the beginning, and how did you roll it out and educate consumers? Was there a big marketing budget from the get-go?
That's a great question. The answer is no. So I think it's very, and I say this as a marketer, like that's what I did for most of my career, was brand marketing. And I would really recommend against doing marketing straight out of the gate. Your product has, as I said earlier, your product really has to stand on its own two legs. And what you should be figuring out initially is your concept. You should be figuring out product market fit. So, say I ran consumer groups myself. I have some experience in that. I've done it before, but I think anybody can do it, where, you just take your product to a group and listen to what people say. That qualitative feedback at small scale can be very, very helpful. I think after you've spoken to 20 to 30 people, you're going to start to hear patterns in what they're saying, and try and get different people, different groups, and see where the patterns are. And so your first task is really just to find your product market fit, work on your concept. And so that might mean you might need to make a change in your packaging or the way that you're positioning your concept. You might want to do some, social media advertising to see how people resonate with a certain message. And, it should all be kind of testing. But really, I think the advantage for food and beverage brand is you can go in a store, and people walk into stores every day looking for products, particularly if you go into the right stores, which is, independent natural retail is a really great place to do this. Partners like Whole Foods and Sprouts are great as well, because people are looking for new products there. If you're in the natural food and beverage space. So, just observe initially. Don't waste your money on marketing straight out the gate. It's a really good way to burn through capital. You're going to need that money for inventory, and if a production run goes wrong, and to hire some people, and keep on top of your financial data and stuff. And and then we started to spend money once we were confident that we had product market fit, and we had the opportunity through COVID to spend on digital marketing, because the cost of inventory was very low, and we could see the return on that. So we actually built a reasonably sizable D2C business in that time. But initially I would say marketing is very, very easy. It's around the concept. There's not a lot you can do. It's sort of sampling, and then I would think about anything that you do outside of that. Do something exceptional that really stands out, and be disciplined about only doing that. An example that we did in our first year in business, which I would caveat that we had raised, a reasonable amount of capital by that time. So we were on a fast growth curve. But we did a pop-up at Grand Central Market in LA, and we took over a store there for 2 weeks. This was our first full year in business. And, it was a huge thing that we ran ourselves. We probably spent over $100,000 on it, which was a large sum of money for us at the time. But it was something that was really exceptional that, made our investors believe in what we were doing. It created buzz amongst consumers, and it created belief in our team as well. And, I always tell our team, I say, look, 90% of marketing is just ignored anyway. So if you're putting out something that is average or that you don't think is exceptional, don't bother, because it's just going to get ignored anyway. Just stop it and use the time, the energy, and the resource to invest in something truly exceptional that actually has a chance of getting noticed. And, when you're going by that mantra, actually save yourself a ton of time as a startup brand. So I'd say the early stages are very easy. As we've gone past, $100 million in revenue, we've now started to look at how do we build an emotionally resonant brand positioning. And that's been a big exercise, but that's, at a much, much larger scale than we were at, 2-3 years ago. So I'd say in those early stages, keep your powder dry, the basic sampling and stuff is good. But I think, I see people spending too much time and energy and money on marketing in the very early stages of their business.
Awesome. Well, look, David, we will wrap there, but I was going to say thank you so much for taking the time to share with our community. Congratulations on all your success with OLIPOP. It's incredible what you guys are doing. And I really appreciate your openness, honesty, and just sharing your experience with our community. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey guys, if you love this episode, you've got to check out my interview with Davey Fogarty on how he finds trends in undercapitalized markets and turns them into multi-million-dollar businesses.
I'm generally looking for trends globally. We find trends that haven't been kind of capitalized in certain markets or in certain marketing channels.
Yes.
And then we also obviously add our flair to it. You need to differentiate your product.